There's a question that I've been asked quite a few times since the last SPL games, the Super Regionals, and it's always coming back, and I figured I'd finally give a good answer to it, and that's Stone of Gaia. Why do we suddenly see Stone of Gaia everywhere? Why did this come back even though the item was nerfed? Why do we see multiple on the same team? What's the whole idea behind that? And that's exactly what we're gonna dig into today. In order to do that, we need to look at the meta, especially on the competitive level first, where we frequently see strategies applied at the moment that include either multiple warriors or multiple guardians on the team. Often 3 combined with 2 carries, and then you have 1 tanky jungler, 1 tanky solo, and 1 tanky support. This kind of leads to itemization changes surrounding this or revolving around this kind of strategy. When you have 3 characters that are typically designed to soak up a lot of damage but also have a decent amount of crowd control, you're not as dependent on some stats as you'd usually be, especially on stats like cooldown reduction. Still a great stat, obviously, don't get me wrong, and you still want to build this, but it's not quite as mandatory when you have 2 other people who can use crowd control at any point instead of you when yours is down. And that's something we see reflected in builds. We see more pickups of items like Hide of the Urchin, Oni Hunter's Garb, Midgardian Mail, Hide of the Nemean Lion, and similar things. Also, you have the option to spread out aura protection items more. Not only talking about the direct protection auras like Sovereignty, but also items that have protection and an aura, like Voidstone or like Shogun's Kusari. So there's a lot more flexibility when you have 3 characters that kinda have similar builds to some degree at least, and they can utilize similar items, leaving you with more room to breathe in your build, so to speak. Now there are 2 counters to a triple guardian or multiple warrior guardian comp. One is percentage penetration, which you will use to go through their protections. In order to counter percentage penetration as a guardian or as a warrior, you want to build health. Because health is not affected by penetration directly, it will still lower the effective health, but you will still have more health in the end. Then, the other item you need to look out for is Concise. Theoretically, there are other items with percentage health damage, but these aren't very relevant at the moment, especially Soul Reaver is just not having the best time, and mages are not having the best time in those comps. So Concise is the one you really want to look out for. The enemy hunter is the guy that can deal the most damage through that by going directly for your health for the percentage value. How do you counter that? With protections, because Concise damage is not true, it's physical damage. So if you have physical protection, you will be lowering the damage of Concise. Now, there is a point in the game where a hunter will have both. He will have penetration and he will have Concise. What do? You try to soak up more damage and somehow sustain through any sorts of burst that may hit you. And what you can do for that, if you have 3 frontliners, is a strategy where you just switch out your frontliners. When one loses too much health, get that one to the backline where he can then sustain up in some way. In the backline you will still be aggressed on, but usually more by frontliners, by tanks that don't deal that much damage, so it's not as important for you to have quite as much tankiness, but rather to keep away the enemy supports or frontliners from your carries, which works more throughout peel, and then your carries will do the damage. Then at the same time, you can just put another frontliner more towards the front and let that one push in until he loses health and you can switch out again. An item that facilitates this a great deal is Stone of Gaia due to its regeneration. If you have 3 frontliners and they all have Stone of Gaia in their builds, they will be constantly healing up to a certain degree, which is not to be underestimated. They can drag out the fight until the enemy runs out of health unless they put themselves in a very awkward spot, by consistently getting that heal for themselves and keeping up the peel for their damage dealers. And that is a strategy that is super hard to counter, with Stone of Gaia playing a major role here as it's the only item that gives you that high sustain for yourself as a non-healing character. The only item self-heal that can compete with this is Lifesteal on high damage dealers, but that's not the case for any tanky character, and they make more use of the overall stats of Stone of Gaia anyways, as it has so much effective HP, and also it cannot be countered by, for example, Hide of the Nemean Lion or Thorns, as you don't have to hit anyone for the heal to be active. But that's by far not the only reason we're seeing Stone of Gaia so much. As you can see from these stats from SmiteProBuilds.com, almost any game in the Super Regionals that include either Artio or Xingtian would have them build Stone of Gaia at some point of their build. I made a stat comparison a very long time ago regarding Stone of Gaia and various other tank items. This was specifically for supports in the early game. The starting build here was Watchers and Reinforced Greaves, and the character was level 10. So there was a little bit of base protection, but very, very low values, and pretty much nothing around it, and the effective health values of all these items were weighed against each other, both physical and magical. These stats are not 100% up to date anymore. For example, Height of the Urchin has been nerfed since, so some of the other items may actually be worse than it looks like here. But even back then, if you look at the stats for Stone of Gaia, the effective health wasn't crazy, the physical effective health. But the longer the game went, the longer the fight went, the better it became. At 15 seconds, it was already a much better spot compared to other items. In terms of magical effective health, it was better than most of the physical protection or multi-protection items that you have access to at that point. So it wasn't a bad item even as a very early rushed item when it comes to sustain in a extended fight. And that was only that benefit. For every time you were not in a fight, every time that you were not full HP, Stone of Gaia would have the additional benefit of healing you back to full. So you would always have access to the full effective HP, while the enemy might have to back to base because they don't have that HP 5 that the other items just simply don't offer. And regardless of that effective health, Stone of Gaia was still one of the cheapest items out of the bunch. But that is not nearly all. This is Stone of Gaia as a first defense item. If you build it later, you will already have the protection to back up the health, because Stone of Gaia is just health. And that means that the effective health drastically increases. Around 4th, 5th slot, this item becomes insanely good in terms of stat value for the price. You just get so much out of it in terms of both regeneration and the health that you have in a fight. This is something that goes way back to the days of the selfish support that I made with Incon Season 3. Stone of Gaia was already such an effective item for any sort of health, and it only got better since, basically, because it kinda got changed in the process. And the regeneration should not be underestimated either. There's actually an interesting post. It's not quite up to date anymore because it refers to Stone of Gaia's old passive, but it's still worth a read for this part at least. Made by Godwans on Team Dignitas website. I will hopefully link it down below. The calculation he made is very interesting. One fact about Smite that a lot of people don't know is that new minion waves spawn every 30 seconds. This means that with Stone of Gaia complete, you'll be regaining 150 plus 12% of your max health between every wave. For perspective, a single health pot restores 250 health over the course of 25 seconds, which when stacked with Chalice of Healing provides you with 500 health over 25 seconds. For Stone of Gaia to be as efficient as having both ticking at the same time, you would need to have 2917 health, which is something that will not be happening until later in the game. You will most likely start with Chalice of Healing anyways, so you can rely on that and Stone of Gaia for the later stages of the laning phase. And either way, Stone of Gaia can give you a passive ticking health potion and Chalice of Health for no cost, and still doesn't prevent you from building those consumables. That's a lot of sustain. I think this is a very interesting comparison, and with this in mind, it's no surprise that we see it being picked up earlier and earlier. We often see it in lane against other Guardians, because they simply won't have the damage to bully you out. You don't need specific magical protection against them. Stone of Gaia is fine for sustain. You're not looking to trade if you're a Guardian yourself. There's no benefit in it, you just want to farm. So you just sustain forever and ever, stay in lane, don't lose out on any farm, and you're good to go. It's a constant pot at least that you'll have on your back just by having this item, and that's very early into the game. But Stone of Gaia had a nerf. It used to have a CC immunity, a knockback pull immunity, that it no longer has. And I actually undervalued the item afterwards, I gotta say that here. I didn't think it would become as popular again in its current state. I thought it was kinda kicked out a little bit. The new passive is, if you're hit by a knock up, knock back, pull or grab, you gain 10% of your maximum health over the next 10 seconds. This can only occur once every 90 seconds. But let's put that in perspective a little bit, alright? In 5 seconds, in combination with the other passive, which is still ticking, you will regenerate 7% of your maximum HP if you get hit by any of those CCs, which is very likely to happen unless the enemy comp specifically picks so that they don't trigger Stone of Gaia, but usually there will be some sort of knockback they can easily get hit by if you want to. On top of that, you will have 25 HP that's on the item as well. So on a 2000 health tank, which is really not that much, you'll be regenerating 165 HP in 5 seconds. That means in 10 seconds, for the whole duration of the passive, you will regenerate 330 health. That is more than a hell heal with a decent amount of scaling added to it. And that's only with 2000 health. The more health you have, which scales up later in the game usually, the better this item becomes, the better this passive becomes. So you can basically get a free heal when the enemy knocks you up and more. Now I've given you so many benefits. What are the downsides? It is just sustain. This item is nothing but sustain and tankiness. That's very beneficial in many situations, either while in lane or while roaming around as a jungler if you're kind of trading a lot and you're getting low and you constantly heal up, or while in an extended team fight. But it doesn't offer the cooldown reduction, it doesn't offer the utility that other items have through passives, through auras and all that kind of stuff. That all goes out of the window, and that's why it's easier to use this when you split your auras across multiple tankier targets, across multiple tankier guardians on your team or warriors. And this brings us to the question if it's worth it for a single tank, because you don't get the same benefit and you sacrifice something. Now, the thing is, most of the time you will have a guardian in support and a warrior in solo who can still both make great use of this, so I do think the value is still there. And even if it's just for yourself, egoistical playstyle kind of works better, especially in casual or ranked, quite often, and as such you will benefit more from being alive yourself longer and doing more, when the setup for your team may not be as beneficial as they may not emphasize on your lockdown the first time, and you might want to go for a second round, and in that case you rather want to have more health for that second round. Also, towers have already been made more tankier, but now Titan's Bane is getting nerfed as well, so we'll generally see longer fights. It takes longer to take down a tower, and that is something that will be impactful in that regard too, as that means that fights get longer, and when fights get longer, Stone of Gaia gets better. When fights are shorter, Stone of Gaia has less value, because if you get bursted before you can utilize the passive much, then it really doesn't make much sense. As such, the benefit of Stone of Gaia is definitely there now, and the effect is something that is easy enough to trigger in most situations, so I think it's great for that. Many can make use of it, especially with solos and often guardians and support as well as tankier junglers when the team allows it. So overall, it's definitely a strong item. I just wouldn't always prioritize it as a first choice. Against many physical solo laners, you still want other items to not get bullied out. Against many others, you just need something else, or on certain guards, you just want to build something else first. Sometimes you just want that Void Stone, that Genji's guard, that Breastplate of Well, whatever it is, depending on the guard and the opponent, which can be more fitting for your character. But overall, Stone of Gaia is definitely something to be considered later into the build. But then, again, at the same time, you will still have teammates complaining about it because it really doesn't have any other effect for them personally, which is something that is always worth keeping in the back of your head. And this is something that will always affect Stone of Gaia as long as it remains in this state, no matter how the primary passive changes or anything like that, as long as the regeneration is there. Also, keep in mind that Stone of Gaia is still countered by anti-heal. This is worth knowing both for the people building it. If there's excessive amounts of anti-heal on the enemy team, you might not want to build it. And likewise, if you see a lot of Stone of Gaias on the enemy team and you want to counter them, anti-heal is a good option to do that. And with that, thank you guys for watching. I hope this gave you a better insight into the topic and explained a little bit how it all works. If you're not subscribed yet and you enjoyed this type of content, feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell. It really helps me out and gives you the chance to win some codes down in the description. Also, this is the place where I put random plugs, and today the plug is gonna be discord.gg/DukeSloth. You can hang out with me on Discord and write stuff. That's pretty cool, so if you want to do that, feel free to stop by there. See you for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth, out.